Good morning. My name is Joe Bandel, and I am the last Rosicrucian. Uh, we're going to start talking about the 13th century and courtly love. This will take probably two or three videos because the subject is quite intensive. Um, so bear with me on that. Courtly love, or the age of chivalry, it historically is from the 12th century to the late 16th century, and is a notable time in the history of women and the beginning of feminism, if you will. At the beginning, women were basically despised not only by men but by themselves. They didn't have, they weren't hardly treated as people. And this is the time period. Well, I should go back. I have to backtrack here. Back before Christ, before the invention of reading and writing, over 4,000 years ago, women ran the place. There were goddess-based religions, and the goddess-based religions had the females playing a prominent role because it was the females that brought life into this world. And they were also responsible for death. So the whole focus way back then was around women and the important role they played. Then gradually the male became more powerful and more empowered, and it was, as I have mentioned in earlier videos, around the time of the invention of reading and writing that the tide turned for the male. Well, it's this time, during the age of chivalry, that the tide began to turn back in favor of the female. Now, the beginnings were small, but they led to a lot of the things that are happening in the women's movement today. At the end of the 16th century, women were respected and admired, and this set the stage for the modern women's movement. Now, back during the goddess religions of ancient times that were matriarchal and dominated by women, they failed to consider the male's growing importance. And this time, men were so obsessed about living in their heads that they kind of indulged the female, kind of indulged the woman and let her do what she wanted. And she basically took over the running of things. This especially happened during the Crusades, when a lot of the men were gone and the women were left home to take care of the routine business, and they began to realize that they had a head for business. Now, the Crusades, one of the important consequences of the Crusades was the meeting of cultures, because Europe was living in the Dark Ages compared to Persia, or not Persia, but actually the Muslim, the Arab countries, who were highly civilized and had knowledge of the Greek and Roman literatures. So all of a sudden, these pretty crude, uneducated crusaders met up with this high, for them, a pretty high civilization. and it was quite a shock. So they came back with a lot of eye-opening experiences and wanted to share. And they came back to a world that women had kind of settled into while they were gone. Courtly love was a great theme of the late medieval literature. Europe was rediscovering the sciences and wisdoms of the classical world through the influence of Muslim scholars and the translations of Greek and Roman texts, which I basically said. So they were getting back some of the philosophy, some of the science. This was a golden opportunity for women of the upper class. At the same time, the cult of the Virgin Mary was brought back to Europe by the Crusaders. Courtly love was class-conscious, escapist, and idealized. It was basically considered a daydream, a harmless daydream by a lot of people, but it was very powerful in its own way, as we shall see as we get going. Now, courtly love was the game of love. We've all heard about the game of love. Well, this is where that kind of started. It was first thought to have been characteristics of the Romantic German and Celtic peoples. Or, and I'm bringing this up, the remnants of the bringing forward of the organic Gnostics from the Bogomils that came from the Caucasus area from Eastern Europe that still had the traces of those early feminine religions, goddess religions. Now it was also considered a kind of a conspiracy of the Cathars to overturn the church. The Cathars, again, the Bogomils, going back to that Eastern Europe influence. But mostly it was owed to the Arabs, because the Arabs treated their women differently than the Europeans did. The Arabs kept their women apart from everybody else. They segregated them. They had them kind of closed up, locked in or they had them in harems. They had them wear the veil over their faces. Where in Europe, the female was just out in public. And because she was out in public, she was not considered special. The Arabs considered their women special. And that trait also influenced this idea of courtly love. The idea of love, courtly love, was sufficiently possible to be attractive, but improbable enough to be a challenge. It was kind of like a hopeless case of soulmates. And that's probably the way to think in a metaphysical sense. That's probably the way to really think of courtly love. This was a meeting of souls, not a meeting of sexual pleasures. In fact, one of the phrases back then was that the union of souls was 1,000 times more beautiful than that of bodies. So the whole concept of courtly love was tantric. It was talking about the mixing, the touching, the union of male and female souls. That's important, because that's an important part of the organic Gnostic and their teachings that are very tantric based. Education at the time was spreading to the point where in every aristocratic family there was at least one person who could read and write, and they would snap up a book because there were not very many to read, and so they could read, and then they'd want to talk about what they read. They want to talk about their ideas just like we do today. So the nobility, they began to permanently employ scholars. The scholars would help with the business deals. They would write the legal papers, keep the accounts, and add some scholarly debate to the household, and actually probably provide tutorship to the younger generation of children. Now, in the countryside, for the common people, sexuality was rampant, with succubi and incubi everywhere, vampiring and sucking up the energies of those with weaker blood. And the prevailing opinion came from the Albigensians or the Cathars, which was there was no sin from the belly button and below. That was all physical body stuff. They were talking about the soul. They were talking about the love of the soul and soulmates. They weren't talking about the physical consummation of sexuality. Now the priests made generous use of this idea. The upper part of the body became so spiritual it no longer knew what the lower half of the body was doing, if you can believe that. To the saint, every act was holy, and the priest was able to sanctify all women who sinned with him, because sin was of the body, not of the soul. In Spain and France, nuns were called the consecrated ones, or mistresses of the priests. This is how pervasive sexuality was among the church, among the common people. And in all of these things that we're talking about, the aristocracy is educated, the common people come last. But it's very interesting to consider how the common people gradually begin to catch up. And in a couple future videos, we're going to be following the common people as well. This is as far as I get. I'm running out of time. So if you enjoy this video, please donate, share it with others. There is a place to donate on my main web page. My main web page is marked down below the video. Go there. I'm posting a lot of regular posts that are associated with the video, but not of the same information. So subscribe to this video. Can subscribe to my website as well. I appreciate any donations can help. $5 is awesome if you can do that. Just click on the link on my webpage. My webpage is listed down below. Comments are welcome. Thank you and have a very good day.